Welcome, everyone. Today we're speaking with Efe Ozmen. Efe was born in Adana, Turkey, and is a multidisciplinary artist who has lived and worked in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, since 2017. He earned his MFA at California College of the Arts. His practice utilizes everyday actions and mundane elements to uncover the poetry within numbing routine of society's daily mechanics and artificial environments, such as the image, graphic-based, physical, and digital urban spaces. With a focus on errors and repetitive actions, he seeks to highlight the controversy in the forgotten, ignored, and canonical. His videos and installations have been shown at various galleries and institutions throughout the Bay Area, such as Embark Gallery, Minnesota Street Project, as well, and the SalesForce Tower as well. So, Efe, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for this Zamin Project conversation.
Hi, Roula. Thanks for having me. It's great to be.
One of the great things about this project is meeting artists for the first time, people that I haven't had any good fortune to meet previously. So this is the first time I've talked with you, and I'm super excited about that. And that's happened quite a few times actually in the process of interviewing these the artists. That and on the other side of it, I realized like, hey, here's this person that the next time I see you, hopefully it's in person, we'll just be friends by that point. And that's what I love about this community. So that's very exciting. So it says in your bio that you've lived in the Bay Area since 2017. Did you arrive here to attend graduate school, or had you lived here before that?
No, I came exactly for my MFA education and in the summer of 2017. So that's the beginning of my Bay Area life, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. And was it, so when you arrived at CCA, what drew you to that master's program? And was it the fine arts, or was it graphic arts, or what was the concentration that you pursued there?
Yeah, I was in the MFA Fine Arts program. So I also graduated. My undergrad was in Turkey. It was a visual arts and visual communication program. So it was a kind of like an art program, but very much combined with the graphic design and video and such disciplines as well. And my path, was I was making installations and like performance-based practices. So I thought it was a nice, after, like talking with some people and like some artists, I thought like California College of Arts was a great option for me to go take my master's education. And yeah, that was because of that. And like the reason I chose was to, have the freedom of, to be able to go any path and be able to be in conversation of, different kind of artists and students. So that was the reason I chose that program.
That's exciting. There's something about or what's written in your bio which has stood out for me when I started reading it earlier today, and I've been thinking about it. It's beautifully described. A focus on errors and repetitive actions. How did that become something that you're so interested in? Like, what's the basis for all of that, and how does that manifest in your work as well? Because it's so interesting.
Initially, I was mostly thinking about the environment we live in the sense that like it's rather I would define it as like heavily circulating images and information. So within this environment, and it's like very much attention oriented, like just to grab your attention. And I think it's a tool of I'd say the capitalist system, but any, basic system that really wants to grab your attention in that sense. So, and it posits itself in this, like, almost like the perfect system, like everything is going well, that's the, like the companies, the brands, everything that wants to grab your attention is kind of creates this illusion as like everything is going well and like in track. And and by the time, you, without noticing, it becomes your normal, that's like the average cost consumer wants, like, expects from anything, like,
Yeah.
So human error is kind of feels like unexpected,
Yeah.
in this built system. So I started to, find these little errors and those kind of things that makes you believe that, like, gets you angry, why is it not happening, kind of thing,
Yeah.
that because that's as if, like, that's not part of nature. So but it is. So I started being interested in, those kind of things that, like, that breaks that, that that track of, like, everything is going well, everything, you just gotta, like, pay and go and consume, so
Absolutely.
I guess that was the initial part that I got interested in that.
Yeah. So as an artist, as a maker, like it sounds like, or it's true, there's that trial and effort, failure of whatever it is that you're working on, if it's material based or the idea that you're working with just doesn't sort of come to fruition, like you, as someone who inhabits that space where failure is as much a part of the process as success, it's a really interesting, at least for me, to think about, where it's you are, and in your creative space you are seeking out those moments of inadequacy or failure, or something more random than our sort of, as you mentioned, like our scripted daily lives sort of lend themselves to. So I guess the question is, would you say that you are more comfortable with this notion of failure and, like, the things that come out of failure in a creative sense? Would you describe yourself like that?
As a person, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not
Right.
I'm not a very comfortable person, in those kind of situations too.
Yeah.
But in my, I try to give space to those kind of failures,
Yeah.
like, or those errors, in sometimes, I mean, I'd like to define it as, like, a performative practice in some sense, but I don't necessarily, like, go perform in front of people. But
Yeah.
in that period, I just, like, okay, this is the thing I'm going to do, and I just gotta let, this is, this repetitive thing I'm gonna do. I don't know what it becomes, and it kind of develops, in a sense, like, with me, but, like, also like, it finds meaning in itself, like, beyond me, basically. So, like, in that sense, like, I don't, like, I'm not comfortable with being that, like, accepting failure maybe, but I'm comfortable with, like, creating, space for that. And I think, like, that practice is a great place for it to exist for me.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's in the notion of not practice necessarily making perfect, but that practice is like an artistic practice. It's a measurable form of progress, and if it results in, like, a finished piece or an idea that you've been chewing over in your head that is finally realized in some way or another, that it's not so much perfection that we're striving for, but that progress in some way. And I like the idea that you're working toward this notion of progress, which is not necessarily defined by the work output or the success of a given idea, but that it's practice toward progress for the sake of the work itself, to do, like, for the sake of the thinking or the making experience. That's really, I mean, it's a really lovely way to exist in the world, I imagine.
It sure is. I don't know, like, like, the the beautiful thing about that progress is, like, sometimes I can give my comfort that, like, it doesn't need to be reach anywhere, that idea is, because also, like, that expectation of, like, success and definition of success is, like, you gotta keep doing, you gotta, like, be at your best all the time. I don't know, like, some people who can do that, I admire them also, but in a way that, like, that expectation of becoming amazing or whatever, the perfect, that's also, like, we forget that like it's not the only thing we need to do. Like that's not, or maybe like definition of life or whatever meaning or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a beautiful way of undermining the larger systems that we're part of, the capital A art world that expects certain stages of progress. So from the MFA to the work being shown to being picked up by a gallery and gallery representation, like the ways in which sort of capitalism and that push for production, that push for success is built into the world that we inhabit. And you come to it from this sort of from the left sideways kind of perspective where like, let's see where this falters. Let's see where the cracks are. Let's see where inadequacy or failure or however you want to describe it, like works its way into this inevitably because it's human production. And that's what, you know, we at least have to think about that. So it's a really lovely sort of way that you undermine this big churning machine of, you know, capitalism that we're all hopelessly stuck in, it seems. That's a really thoughtful, beautiful, nimble approach to that. I admire that.
Thank you.
So we've been thinking about resources. Part of what Zamin Project is all about is thinking about who is in our community and how do we define resources. So when I have certain ideas about that, but I'm curious to know, like, what does resources in relationship to the SWANA community, what does that mean for you? How do you define that for yourself?
You mean in the Bay Area? Or
Bay Area, or, you know, it can, I mean, it's maybe perhaps specific to the Bay Area, but I think it can be defined, you know, as broadly as you would like to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, you know, interesting and challenging question too. You know, like when I'm thinking about that, especially, you know, who, like, in what way to define SWANA community too. You know, like that's also a very, you know, challenging in that way to define who are these people in that sense. Like especially like looking from the point of someone being in America or like in the region too. You know, it's very politically intervened from many actors. So, you know, as a human being from that part of the region, I mean, coming here, I started thinking about it most because, you know, I was more in conversation with people, especially from the school, you know. So how to define the resources, that's kind of that I cannot come to answer about that. But but I feel like, you know, there's a community and it's like being more defined in that sense, or, you know, it's coming out of its pristine or you know, predefined self, you know, like because like it's always been defined from actors that are not part of it. So I feel like being here, I can find a community that is more honest and courageous to define and take the, you know, matter into their own hands. So yeah, maybe that would be my answer to that.
Yeah. Was it when you arrived in 2017 and you started at CCA, were you sort of able to immediately connect with people who are part of the SWANA community, or did it take time? What brought you into this wider community?
When I first came, I already had some friends who were, you know, studying or working at other places in the Bay Area. So there was an initial start. That was not an art community necessarily, you know. So that was a different kind of community, and like mostly I knew people. So that was kind of a soft entrance for me, maybe I would say. And with the school, there was, I found myself very lucky that like there was not only from SWANA community, but like it was a great group of artists I walked into basically in that school, and that comfort it gave me was just, you know, very, very, you know, very pure actually. So like it was a really free space to, talk, make work, contemplate on ideas and stuff. And with the Swana community, that was an entrance basically. We didn't for, I would only say this for like maybe the arts community, because there were like few people from the Swana community that was like, oh, you're from there, I'm from here, or like and that led to a larger conversation, and like and since art community being like kind of tightly connected in the Bay Area too, that also led, and like Bay Area being like more open to like any kind of thing actually was a very very soft and comfortable entrance and introduction.
I like the way you phrase that, a soft landing. That's I like to think, I hope that as Zamin Project, as it sort of gains momentum, that people who are moving to the Bay Area for whatever reason, if it's school or if it's work or just to live, like that they'll people who are from the vast diversity that is the Swana community, the worldwide Swana community, that they'll meet a similar soft landing, and that they'll just introduce themselves to us, because the more we know, the more people we know, just the better, the bigger the more amazing this community is. And it's that's sort of extemporaneously, like that's when I think of resources, that's sort of top of mind for me. So you phrase that beautifully. So this is the last question that I'm always sad when these conversations come to an end. Interesting. But I'm curious, like what have you been thinking about lately? Like what's top of mind for you just in the last day or the last week or the last month or the last year? Like what have you been thinking about lately?
I mean, so especially like during the COVID, like start the lockdowns and that, and like luckily, like SF took it like very seriously, like, and that led to being like very isolated and like being on. And so during, I mean, even before that, like because I guess like part of my family being away all the time, that I always had this, digital being highly intervening our lives, so like basically that's becoming part of the world. And I was always thinking about this notion of like passing of time and being somewhere else while you're here, like these other places, like getting on top of each other always, and so that's basically what I've been thinking about so long. And also because like it's been 3 years that I wasn't able to be visiting my home, and that like the lockdown increased that feeling of like that other place that I can't go back, or like one time, or like is it safe? And so that was part of the like being duality in spaces, or like in multiple places in your head, that imaginative surroundings, environments becoming real in the sense of emotions, basically. Absolutely. So that was the main things that I was thinking about. Luckily, I was able to visit in the last month, and that kind of, I mean, that also increased, because it was a lot of traveling, and at some point I forgot where I was, like which city I'm in. So, so that being in different places and multiplicity of realities, I think that's been always what's on top of my head mostly.
That's fascinating. I'm glad that you were able to travel, that it sounds like it wasn't a terrible experience. Just because I imagine that a long distance, especially a transatlantic flight, it could activate concerns just about COVID exposure, and who you might, if God forbid you are exposed, and then what that means as far as illness and possible quarantine, and just the whole series of events that potential exposure might activate. But it sounds like on neither end was that something you had to deal with. So that's very
luckily, yeah. I'm glad,
Well, thank you so much, Efe. It's such a pleasure to speak with you in this context, and I look forward to meeting you in real time at some point.
Yes, it was a pleasure for me as well.
Comfortable to do so. And thank you so much for speaking with us as part of Zamin Project. And to our audiences, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you here the next time. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.